All right, people, we're going to be talking about defense here. So it's time for us to get serious. I said it's time for us to get serious. Oh, for goodness sakes. Hi, you're welcome to Red Evony. I am Akayasha. You can call me Aka, and we're going to be talking about defense here. Okay, so here's how this is going to go down. The discussion today is going to be split into two parts. We're going to talk about mindset, your mindset when it comes to defense in Evony. And this is something that a lot of people do not talk about. Then the next part, we're going to talk about the setup. Okay, how do you actually set up your defense to be a good defense? And we're going to go through various things like your generals, troops, and all that kind of stuff. Since the popularization of T1s, the way we view defense has fundamentally changed in the game. Now, you might have talked to different people and asked them about building a good defense, and they'll tell you things like, oh, you need 400 million T1s. You need 700 million. You need 1 billion T1s. Okay, that's all fine and good, but what is that actually for? Let me put it a different way. To you, what do you consider as a good defense? That might be a bit tough for some of you to answer. So let me show you some reports here. Okay, I have this report here, and you can take a look at it. So let me ask you, is this a good defense? This defense here is against a siege rally. You can see the rally setters generals. You can see mine. Okay, that's the power exchange. And let's take a look at the troops. So the guy had some T15s, and he had two other people in the rally with him. I had one person with ground reins. So good for reins, but not much help against siege rallies. So let me ask you again, is this a good defense? Now, some of you might probably agree and say, yes, it is a good defense. But I'm pretty sure that there'll be a few people that will say, no. Okay, this is a crappy defense. There'll probably be a few people that will say that. So, okay, let me show you a different report. Here is another report that I have. And this was straight up 1v1 situation. And I was attacked with siege in this situation. So you can see the generals. And that's the power exchange. So let me ask you guys, is this a good defense? Some people might say yes, it is because of the significant power exchange. Other people will say no. They'll probably look at the guy's generals and say, well, the general wasn't strong enough or something to that effect. So some people might agree that this is a good defense. Some people might not. Okay, let me show you one more report. So this is another report that I have. And this is what the power exchange is looking like. Okay, so in this situation, I took a ground rally. Those are the generals there. And this is pretty much what happened. So is this a good defense? Some people will look at it and say, yes, it is. They'll say it's an awesome defense. Some people will probably have a question or two to ask about this defense. They'll want to ask, oh, okay, what were the buffs of the guys that were attacking me? Okay, they would ask, all right, did they have T15s or something? As you can see, the leader of the rally had T15s. You can see 6 people in the rally versus just me. So, yeah, they'd have some questions to ask before they can make up their mind whether this is a good defense or not. What is the point of me saying this? I'm saying this because when it comes to determining what is a good defense or not, the circumstances of the defense become important, and also the mindset of the person that is looking at the report. So let me ask you again, to you, what is a good defense? Please leave a comment about this so that we know what everyone considers as a good defense. Now, with that being said, it might still be a bit difficult for you to actually say what you think is a good defense, especially when you see some of the T1 stuff that has been going on lately. So let me give you a different scenario. You're trying to build your defense on the low end of the spectrum. You want to be able to defend against things, okay? You don't want a situation where you can't defend against anyone. In other words, you're basically a farm. You don't want that kind of situation. But on the high end of the spectrum, do you want a situation where, irrespective of how big you are, irrespective of how much you spent on the game, that you can go and sit in front of one of the strongest players in Evony and expect to take a hit and defend it well? I mean, is that what you're looking at when you're talking about good defenses? Most likely, you say no for both of those situations. So, meaning that what you consider as a good defense will fall somewhere in the middle of those two situations. So again, I'll ask you, what do you consider as a good defense? It's important for us to note that your mindset and the way you think about defense plays a very important role in how you build up your keep and the kind of defenses that you're happy with taking. For me, I have a clear vision of what makes a good defense for my keep. Okay? I'll talk about that a bit later on in the video. But ideally, you should have something similar for your keep and what you consider as a good defense. Now, aside from that, when we are talking about mindset, it is important to note that different people play the game very differently. And I'll be honest, getting my head around this was something that I struggled with. The people that have seen a lot of my videos, particularly my T1 videos, have the notion that I am anti-T1. I'm really not. I have T1s. In fact, I'll show you what I have later on. The problem is with the way T1s have become popular in the game, some people think that that's all they need to save them. That's all they need to have a good defense. Just get some T1s. And we all know, we've all seen keeps that have taken it too far. But the fact of the matter is that there are people that are perfectly happy with playing the game like that. And in all honesty, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. If you're enjoying playing a T1 trap and that is what you like doing in the game, that's all great. If you want a bigger, more well-rounded keep, that's cool too. That all comes from the mindset of the player. So again, mindset is very important when you are deciding what kind of defense that you want to have. Now, I've made an in-depth video on defense before. I broke down all the essential components of having a good defense, and a lot of that stuff is still very valid. So, if you haven't seen it, maybe you should take some time and check it out later. But with all that we've talked about up to now, you should start forming an idea of what you think is a good defense, what you think is a good defense for you, with what you have currently right now. Now, earlier on in the video, I mentioned that I have a clear vision of what constitutes a good defense for me and my keep. To be more accurate, I have a certain profile of what my keep can and should be able to defend against. And as long as I'm able to defend against that, then it's a good defense for me. So this is what it is for my keep. If I am defending against a player that has T15s or lower, the player's buffs, attack buffs, are between 2,500 and 3,000, and the player's march size is between 5 and 6 million. That's the profile of what my keep should be able to defend against. And when I can take a defense that falls into this category, it's a good defense for me. Now, of course, once things start getting out of this profile, then I know it's a red flag. For example, if I come up against a player that doesn't just have T15s, but has T16s, that's a problem for me. And I'm sure you guys have probably seen that video already. If you haven't, check it out. It's good. So anything outside this profile, I know clearly that my keep is not built to take this. But anything within this profile and below, yeah, I would take that defense. Okay? So that's me. What's yours? That's what you need to start thinking about as you're building your defense. Now that we've talked about mindset and everything that it entails, let's actually talk about setting up your keep to have a good defense. And we're going to talk about different things from generals to troops and all that kind of stuff. And I'll show you what I actually have right now. So let's jump right in. Let's pop the hood of this thing and see what we have underneath it. Oops, sorry, wrong picture. Let me take that again. Let's pop the hood of this thing and see what we actually have underneath it. The first thing that we're going to want to talk about is your world general and your assistant general. So if we come over here real quick. So in my case, I have George Dewey as my main world general, and I have Leo III as my assistant. And this combination was chosen specifically because of the style I want to play. For me, I want to build a defense that is able to take everything. I want to be able to take range hits, ground hits, mounted, siege, whatever you can throw at me, I want to be able to take it. And from what I've seen, George Dewey is arguably the best general that is suited to do that. Now, I've touched on this in a previous video where I talked about a balanced approach and a specialized approach. I know a lot of people have Boudica or, some other kind of general like that. But for me, Dewey or maybe Marshall are the best generals for the kind of approach that I want to take personally. Okay? As for my assistant general, because of the way I have set up my defense, I wanted a siege general. And Leo III was the best option that I had available at the time. There might be arguably better options now, like maybe someone like Teach or Mu Kuiying, but I've already invested in Leo and I'm sticking with him. Now, with all that being said, let me show you my Dewey. This is my George Dewey, okay? And he has 4 pieces of Civ gear and 2 Parthian pieces. Of course, I don't have access to the full choreo set, so getting the choreo bow and the choreo chest piece is still something that is out of my reach. The main thing that you're probably wondering about are the refines on my general. And when I started to make some changes to my defense, I reworked the refines on my George Dewey. And that's for several reasons. The biggest reason for me came after I made my flats versus percentages video. I'm being 100% serious here. Reworking my George Dewey cost me over 4 million gems. I'm serious, 4 million gems I had to spend to rework my George Dewey. What I did was a bit of an experiment because I wasn't 100% sure that it would work. We know things like going, flat mounted on your wall general works. We know that. But for me, I wanted something different. Just because of the mindset I have for my defense. My wall general is not a mounted general. Okay? So I wanted something more well-rounded. So I did my refines. We'll go through them. All flats. Okay? The majority of my refines are flats. And I did them for ground and for mounted. So we can go through it. You'll see the ground and the mounted refines. We go through this one there. Okay, this one, I got a good siege HP refine. And considering the size of my keep, I thought, why not? So I kept it. But again, focus, ground, mounted. Same thing here, ground, mounted. And finally, this one, exactly the same thing. So That's how I set up my Judge Dewey. Now, in case you're thinking of using a similar setup for your wall general, one thing you need to keep in mind is that our situations might be different. Using flats or percentages will depend on your relative size to the people you're playing against. Are you about the same size as the people you're fighting, or are you bigger than most people? For me, I went with flats because the majority of the people that would attack me, so we're talking about K40s and above, those are the only people that will see my keep and be like, oh yeah, let's attack that. Okay? Those people are able to debuff me completely. No question. They debuff everything, half, all the way down. So, in my case, it's better for me to have flats over percentages. There is a drawback to this though. And that drawback is that my top tier troops are weaker than if they had percentages. So that's the trade-off that I have to deal with this. When you're making your decision for your defense, that's something that you also have to take into consideration. Okay, so that's the wall general. Let's go and look at the troops. So I'll show you the troops that I have, okay? So we come over to the rally spot, and there you see my total troops right now, over 500 million. And I'm sure the first thing that you want to see is the T1s. So let's scroll down and take a look at my T1s. Okay, here we go. So I have 150 million T1 calves and 100 million T1 ground. Okay? Now, you can tell from the way I refined my wall general. Ground and mounted. Ground and mounted. You can see it in the T1s. I have ground and mounted. Now, a lot of you will know that the mounted approach, just going T1 mounted, works. I don't dispute that. That definitely works. But with the mindset that I have, this is the approach that I prefer. And for me, this works. Okay? I've tried this out. This is the defense that I'm using right now, and this works. So there's another option. You don't have to go the full mounted route. You can definitely go mixed or incorporate ground into your T1s. That's fine. In addition to this, I've also worked on my T2s and my T3s. Okay? So I've got a bit of them there as well. So for T2, my T2 calves are about 50 million. My T2 ground is about 41 million. I still plan on pushing this to about 50 million, but I had other priorities for resources. So for now, it's 40 million. And if we go to my T3, T3 calves and T3 ground are about 30 million. That's the layout that I have when it comes to my lower layers. Now, as we go up, I'll tell you pretty much everything above this point is 2 million. So all my layers above T3 going up to about T11, everything is about 2 million. And then once we get about above that, my T12s and T13s, the numbers start increasing. Now, one thing you will note is that I have more T12 than T13 and T14. That's the way I've structured my keep. T12 is the biggest layer that I have, and it's always going to be that way. I'm going to make sure that T12 is the biggest layer in my keep. Why? Because I use them for attacking and defending, and they are very effective in that point. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is buffs. Because, as you can remember, from my wall general, my refines are focused on ground and mounted. Meaning that I have to use other avenues to buff the other troops in my keep, like ranged and siege. So while I'm developing the buffs in my keep, those are the primary areas that I'm focusing on. Again, that's part of the reason why I have Leo III as my assistant wall general. And for Judge Dewey, you can see as I do his ascension, what's the focus that he has? Ranged and siege. Look at his third ascension. Ranged and siege. Look at the fourth ascension. Ranged and siege. And even the fifth ascension. I haven't gotten to the fifth yet, but when I do, that focus on range and siege is going to be coming out there. So that's one of the ways that I make sure that I'm hitting my priorities of buffing my range and siege troops after the refining that I've done on my World General. Now, aside from this, one other key place that priority comes through is with the duty generals that I have prioritized to ascend. So let's take a quick look at my duty generals. Where are they? Okay, so we have my duty generals here. Okay. And you can see, for example, I have Menchikov and Banchal ascended to 4 stars. That's pretty much the most that I have. Menchikov, in his case, is because he gives a lot of general buffs that are needed. The construction buffs, the in-city troop, in-city defense, debuff. So his, as a general thing, is something that I wanted to increase. But if we look at Banchal, there is a reason why Banchal is one of the highest priority generals I've ascended. Let's look at his stats. First ascension, in-city range troop and siege defense. Second ascension, in-city range troop and siege defense. Third ascension, in-city range troop and siege HP. Fourth ascension, in-city range troop and siege defense and HP. Can you see the pattern there? Because of my priority of buffing range and siege troops, that is why ascending Banchal was one of my highest priorities. Okay? So that's that. Let's look at my other duty generals. You can see John of Portugal ascended to 3 stars. Let's look at what he has. Okay? First ascension, range and siege defense. Second ascension, range and siege defense. Third ascension, range and siege HP. You can see the pattern there. Okay, let's look at Askia Mohammed. All right? In this case, he's focused on ground and mounted troops. And that's largely because, one, I need some balance. Okay? I can't spend all my time focusing on siege and range. They are priorities, but they are not the only things I should be doing. So I ascended him. And why did I focus on him? Because the values you get from his ascension are pretty decent. Then we can see Yulji Mundiok. His first one, ground and mounted, but his second one, range and siege. I wanted to get to this range and siege ascension, which is why I put some effort in working on him here. Now, aside from that, you can see my other duty generals. Okay? Oleg, I've barely done. Raman, I've barely done as well. Skanderberg, I've barely done as well. Why? Because these generals are not largely focused on range and siege. So, for the ascension of my duty generals, they are on the lowest priority for me right now. That's not to say that I will not ascend them. I will. I will still need to do this, but we are talking about priorities here, okay? What's important comes first. So, that's that. For you, when you're working on your duty generals, your priorities might be completely different from mine. And that's perfectly fine, okay? I'm just showing you what I've done and what works for me. So, yeah, you can definitely do what you want for your keep and what you have inside. So, that's for the buffs. Then, the next important thing that we need to talk about is debuffs. There is no way you're going to get around this. Debuffs are very, very important for building a good defense. In my opinion, debuffs are actually more important than buffs. Yeah, just being perfectly honest. Debuffs for me are more important than having buffs. And they are more difficult to get. Without going into too much detail here, let me give you, a quick overview of what my debuffs are like right now. So, for my attack debuffs, for ranged, mounted, and siege, everything is above 1000%. My ground debuff my ground attack debuff is above 700. Okay? Ground attack is difficult to debuff, but that's what I have. So this is the profile of my debuffs. Okay? And I take whatever opportunity that I can to increase these debuffs without even thinking twice. And you should too. In my opinion, not many people pay enough attention to their debuffs when they are building their defense. So those are the key areas of my defensive setup, and I hope that that makes sense to you. Now, one of the key parts of that defense, as I showed earlier, is the wall general, okay? Particularly the refines that I did on him. And if you want to really understand why I decided to do those refines, you can check out this video here, which is the video that I compare doing flat and percentage refines, which one is better. Now, this video doesn't only talk about wall generals. It also talks about all your other generals as well. So if you haven't seen it, be sure to check it out. If you have any questions or comments about building a good defense, please feel free to drop them down below. Thank you very much. Aka signing out.